What's good, y'all? This is John from the One Carolina Show joining you for another edition of One Carolina Live, man. I'm so excited to be with you guys today as we are starting to see all of these different things unfold. Man, it's just some crazy, crazy stuff that's starting to go on, man. And yeah, a lot of crazy things out there on the Twitter sphere today. So I definitely want to talk about what I've been seeing today, the thing that I saw that I hope, man, I don't know. But either way, thank you for joining me this afternoon. And we'll take a further look into it, man. I want to shout out a few of you guys while I'm getting started here, because typically when I walk away from the chat, man, I'm not really necessarily paying attention to what is going on. So I want to make sure that I shout you guys out early, man. So shout out to Conseco 2 times. Shout out to my boy C, Josh, Andrew, Park, and anybody else that jumps in here, man. Y'all make sure to smash that like button. Let's get this thing going. Let's chat. But I want to start with this. Timing is everything. And I think timing is extremely important in a scenario like this, right? And so I saw this. I want to show a couple of things here in a second, but I think it's very ironic that the day that they come out to say what they said about, quarterbacks, which was really nothing more than we've heard already, right? I do find it very interesting that on that same day, the Will Levis odds change. So what I want to do first is just listen to what Frank Reich had to say, kind of recapping the press conference and what we saw already. And so, yeah, let's get to it, man. So this is just the brief press conference that they gave. I think the press conferences are over now, but this is just kind of, some of the information that they had relayed, or that, Frank Reich relayed earlier in the first part of the press conference. But let's check it out.
Right, we get a chance to get out on the field, get an extra week out there. Get our bodies moving, get to install our schemes, get to see the players on the field, doing their thing. So good day today. Also, obviously, I know everybody saw the article on Brian Burns, but since I haven't had a chance to talk to you guys yet.
If you guys can't hear that, let me know, but I'm pretty sure you can hear what's going on.
Excited that he was able to get this done, excited about the prognosis, full and complete recovery, should be ready by training camp. So, it was the right thing at the right time, get this thing squared away and get on the right, get that thing back 100%. So he'll be ready to go by training camp. So I'll open it up from there.
I know it was exciting for you to just be back on the field with the guys. Just talk about that.
No doubt. You get in the meeting room and it's good. You're installing systems. You're talking about what the vision for what we're going to do on defense, in special teams, and in offense. You put it up there on the screen. You can show video on it, but there's nothing like getting on the field and doing it and being able to talk through it with the guys. So it was a good start today.
What's on your checklist in terms of what you wanted to accomplish during mini camp?
Several things.
Twan, what up?
We always kind of list the objectives, and one of those is a big part of it is work on fundamentals and technique.
Popping booties.
You can't emphasize that enough. Huge emphasis for our team, right? We got to build the habits now, build the fundamentals and technique now. That's a foundation, right? So we got a new coaching staff, right? So some of the fundamentals and technique are all the same. They're the same things, but it doesn't matter. We all need to kind of keep going over the basics, and the reason is, we talk about that is, because when you get on the field, you can't think about that stuff. You got to play loose and free. So we got to establish those habits now. So that was a big deal.
Frank, you got that extra week, and you had close to full attendance. I think one or two players is unaccounted for. How important is that to starting off your mission for the season?
Yeah, it shows the quality of players. It shows their buy-in. It shows that they understand the opportunity before us. That's what we have. We have an opportunity, and as coaches and players and as a team, it's up to us to make the most of it. I think it also shows trust between players and coaches. We're not trying to kill the guys right now. We're trying to get better. We're trying to get our systems installed. We're trying to gain a foundation for what we want to do during the season. So it's good to have most of the guys here.
Frank, in terms of installing new systems for guys like outside linebackers, defensive linemen, going from a 4-3 to a 4-3-4, how is this week kind of beneficial in that transition of kind of introducing them to new stuff?
Yeah, it's really beneficial, and it's a big deal. It's a big transition.
It is. I want to stop right there real quick just to talk about that, because that's not something that we've really mentioned a lot. Yesterday when we were on the live, I talked about Jack Campbell when we were doing the mock draft. And one of the, there's such a huge difference between the 3-4 and the 4-3. It doesn't seem like it, but from a personnel perspective, obviously it's different. We know that. but like terminology, things like that can be different. But also the kind of players that you would install in those defenses would be different, even at the middle position. That's why I was wondering, like, I don't know that Jack Campbell, like I saw where Luke Kuechly was getting fitted for a suit. And everybody was saying, what's Luke getting fitted for? And I think it's because he's probably going to, announce the 39th pick. But I just don't see Jack necessarily fitting in that scheme. I could be wrong. I could be dead wrong. But that's interesting that he brought that up. Let's keep going.
It's a big transition, and, particularly for a couple guys like Yador, him moving to an outside linebacker and others. So I think EJ and his staff are doing a great job of kind of cutting it piece by piece.
He just said Yetur Gross-Matos is moving to outside linebacker.
I can kind of hear it broken down piece by piece, and then we kind of put it all together. I think EJ's done a great job of that, and this defensive staff. So, and as players, right, these guys have been playing their whole lives. So my experience with this is there's always an element of excitement to learning a new system, to seeing how I can stretch myself as a player and grow as a player. So I think that opportunity is there for them.
Right. Obviously, you welcome the veterans in today, but you have a new rookie class you're going to welcome in a few days. How much of the offense can you frame around potentially a rookie quarterback at this stage?
A lot, because it's a new offense, so really it's new to the whole team. It's not just going to be new to the rookie quarterback. So we're all kind of starting from the ground floor up, and really the vets get a couple weeks ahead of the rookies, but they'll come in and catch up quickly.
Frank, last week Scott said that he hadn't asked you who you prefer as that #1 pick, didn't want to. Has he asked you yet, and have you guys talked about that, and have you come to a consensus yet?
He did. He actually came in my office yesterday at some point and asked the question. It's kind of like a proposal of sorts. But and I said yes. No, there is consensus, and we're excited.
Who is it?
We'll announce that Thursday at about 8 o'clock.
You said with this first overall pick, you guys didn't have to play games. Now having that consensus, how much easier was that than maybe in 2016 when you guys were trying to figure stuff out and didn't have your pick?
Yeah, I think the process was really first class. Scott handled it perfectly. The scouts were amazing. They really helped us as coaches, helped us frame some things, frame some questions. We all went into the thing with ideas, inclinations, stay true to the process. There's ebbs and flows during the process, right? There's like, ooh, is there any change? I wouldn't say there's any drastic change of mind, but there's ebbs and flows of how much you like a guy. And that's why you have to resist the temptation to make your mind up too early, right? So I thought we as scouting staff and coaches.
Let me say this real quick. Much has been made of the idea that Frank Reich, all the guys, were aware of who they were picking early on. Like, you don't move up. And I can agree with that. Like, there's been a few people that have said that, right, nationally, right, and even some locally that have said you don't move up without having a concrete idea of who your guy is. And I do agree with that to an extent. I really do believe that the idea when they moved up was to say, okay, we've got 4, potentially 5. If you want to throw Hendon Hooker in there, I'm not going to argue with you. But we got 4 guys that we know, okay, we have a #1 overall pick grade on, potentially. Let's go literally through the due diligence. Even if the initial pick was Stroud, even if the initial pick was Young, let's go through the entire process. So I don't think that's conjecture to hear him say that. I think that he really means that.
Did a good job of not falling into that trap. Just take it for what it is. Take it day by day. Go on these visits, watch tape, go through the process, continue to evaluate and talk it through.
At what point did you feel like you knew who the guy was?
I think we all had inclinations early on. Again, not to totally repeat everything I just said, but I just think the conviction built gradually. For us as coaches, because the scouts were ahead of us, right? The scouts were ahead of us. They had already done all their work. So as coaches, as we dug in, our conviction started to build slowly but surely.
Right now that you guys know who's going to be the #1 pick, how much time have you already started to spend on the picks after that and what you guys can do to either move up or move back?
A lot of time. And again, I just take my hat off to Scott and his staff and how that process has gone. We had several draft meetings with the coaches, but more recently, had them in there. Scott kind of running the meetings, getting the coach's final opinion, right? The scouts have already done, 90% of the work, but the coaches kind of come in and we give our evaluation. We meld it together with what the scouts have done. We start wrapping our mind around that 39th pick, and around that 93rd pick, and about all the scenarios: up, down, stay there. What if he's there?
Scott Fitter gonna be in his bag during this draft season. You better believe it. When he said up, down, I was like, oh man, if we stay at 39, I might be shocked. But Scott gonna be in his bag. It would not shock me if we walk away with 10 picks. It would not shock me in the slightest.
What if he's not there? What should we, how does this guy fit? Hey, tell us again how this guy fits into the system, right? Into the scheme. They've been dynamic discussions, and I
What's
think
up,
we're
man?
prepared for those scenarios.
Brian, following off of that, have you had any conversation with the front office about maybe using this veteran minicamp as like a way to get any sort of last-minute tiebreakers on some of those picks?
Not really. It's just a fair question, but not really. It's just more been, this mini camp, just more kind of a methodical next step process. Okay, thank you.
So there you have it. So I saw that, and I find it interesting that the same day that I see that, I see this. And I'm like, wait, what? Excuse me? The odds go from plus 5,000 to today plus 400. Now, I, like many of you, are not extremely familiar with how the betting odds work. But I know enough to know this. That literally takes a guy from being in complete obscurity for the number one pick to pretty much being the lock. And when I saw that, I was like, man. So Twan is in the chat. And shout out to Twan from the 704 Charlotte Bound Show. Twan and I had an interesting conversation, and there was a point that we brought up that I wanted to hone in on. And I kept saying, and Twan agreed, because Twan has echoed a similar sentiment, man, you better be careful about how you talk about Will Levis. And I was saying it in the context of, hey, I wouldn't want to see him in the division, right? But now it seems like things have changed. Now we're seeing it in the context of, oh, you might not want to see him on your team. I'm going to be in full support, as I've mentioned time and time again, of whoever they draft. But I can promise you this. You are kidding yourself if you think John Farmer on draft night is not going to show his behind if we draft this man number one overall. I'm sorry. Call it bias, call it what you want. It's an incredible jump. And like you, Twan, I believe that it's Vegas trying to make money. That's what I'd like to believe. But I just find it too interesting that the timing, I still personally believe it's Bryce. I still personally want it to be Bryce. But it would be it is very interesting that this drops on the day that they have this press conferences and he says that, oh, the pick is in. So then I asked myself, okay, well then let's just hypothetically suggest that it is him, and we got to roll with it. I have a guy that done a film study on him that I follow pretty, intently because he's very, very smart. And I'm going to play this video. This is A to Z film study on Will Levis and why he believes that Will Levis is absolutely a first-round pick. Not necessarily the number one pick, but a first-round pick nonetheless. Let's react.
I try to avoid listening to other draft analysis before I've had a chance to watch the tape myself because
now, many of you may wonder why do you play the speed so fast? So I'll just give you this lesson one time and one time only. Monetization. Let's get back to it.
I don't want to develop biases or opinions that aren't based on what I see on film, but it was impossible to ignore all the negativity surrounding Will Levis. Heading into this video, I was expecting him to be somewhat of a scrub, and so I was surprised to see that he actually does check a lot of the boxes that you want for a first-round quarterback prospect. He has elite arm talent. There are a lot of comparisons to Josh Allen, and I don't think Levis's arm is as explosive, but he can easily push the ball 55 to 60 yards downfield. And what's most impressive about Will Levis is that he doesn't need a clean pocket to step into to get these throws off. You can see on this play against Northern Illinois, he sidesteps the pressure to the left, and then he's able to throw this fade route with perfect accuracy as he's moving in the opposite direction. But the reason that I say Will Levis has elite arm talent and not just elite arm strength is because of the control that he has over touch and ball placement. Throwing the ball 30 yards like he does on this play isn't really impressive for an NFL quarterback prospect, but he's able
Throwing the ball 30 yards on this play isn't impressive for an NFL quarterback. However,
to deliver it with enough elevation to get over these underneath defenders.
Now, not for nothing, CJ can do that in his sleep and more accurately for all you CJ guys out there.
And then it just drops into the catching window. A lot of younger quarterbacks with big arms throw line drives in these situations, and if the defensive back's able to turn around, then it's an interception. But you can see on this play again, there's enough elevation so that Keely Ringo can't make a play on the ball, but then it drops right at the end of the sideline so his receiver can come down with it. He has a good natural understanding of defensive spacing and where he needs to lead his receiver. This is a great throw from the Mississippi State game to lead his receiver away from the safety and into the back corner of the end zone. And this touch is what makes him really effective throwing in the red zone where the windows get tighter. Right here against Vanderbilt, Kentucky's running a concept called Picasso, where you get a post route from the number 1 and then a pump and go from the number 2. And there's not a lot of space to work this concept from the 22-yard line, but Will Levis is able to find his receiver in the back of the end zone.
I will say this. You have to account for the fact that Will Levis did not have a lot to work with last year. That's one thing, and he was coming off an injury. You know, if we're going to give those kind of kudos to people that we like, then I think it's only fair that we give it to those that we may not necessarily be in favor of. And let me just be clear about something. It's not that I don't like Will Levis. As a person, I don't know Will Levis, right? But as a quarterback, I have a preference. And I think my preference is more what I would prefer. Let me say this. If Will Levis was the only option coming out in last year's draft and that was where we were, then he would be consensus number 1. I'd be like, hey, let's take him. Compared to Kenny Pickett, I mean, he's good. I mean, he's okay. But, you know, when you look at the arm strength, when you just look at all the intangibles, the attributes, I would take him in that situation. In this situation, though, in this draft, no. Let's get back to it.
You also see the touch come into play when he's throwing go balls down the sideline. He does a great job of putting the ball into a location where only his receiver can get it. This is another perfect throw on a slot fade from last year. The trajectory of this pass to Wandale Robinson kind of supersedes the coverage on the play.
And he missed him tremendously. I don't know if many of you guys are familiar with Wandale Robinson, but really good NFL player. You know, so, you can't lose those kind of weapons. Like, for all of us guys, for the guys out there that are Bryce guys, like myself, you can't lose those kind of weapons and expect to have the same kind of production. You know, I mean, C.J. Stroud threw less yards, had a lower completion percentage this year than last year. Why? Jackson Smith, like, he was hurt most of the season. So, you know, and you didn't have him in the title game, which, not for nothing, I will say this. For the C.J. guys, let me shoot you some bail on this, right? For the C.J. guys, I will say this. If C.J. had Jackson and they beat Georgia, I don't think that there's anything that Bryce could have done to get that number 1 pick, because many people would see him as Burrow, and rightfully so. Let's get back to it.
There's almost nothing this defensive back could do about this, even if he was in better position. So Will Levis has the arm strength and the touch to attack every level of the defensive coverage, but he also has a really concise throwing motion that allows him to maintain that arm talent regardless of whether he's under pressure or throwing off platform. Mike Renner from PFF usually does a Twitter thread of every NFL draft prospect's longest throw of their college career, and when you watch a lot of them, they're throwing at 60+ yards, but they need 3 or 4 steps to build up that power. With Will Levis, he could be taking a hit or throwing off his back foot, and he can still zip the ball 40 to 50 yards.
He does have a solid arm. I'll give him that. You can't take away from him. Like, he's got serious arm strength.
Downfield, and having a quarterback that doesn't need a clean pocket to get rid of the ball allows you to operate your downfield passing attack even if you don't have the best offensive line. With most quarterbacks, drifting backwards in the pocket isn't a very effective way to deal with pressure because you're not creating enough space to step into the throw, but with Will Levis, he can release the ball off his back foot, and so that makes it a viable option for him to buy some extra time. There are some situations where the number 1 thing you need from your quarterback is velocity, so this is a concept Kentucky called sink. It's play action with 2 deep curls, and this curl route from the number 2 is going to attack the safety and then break off at 15 yards, so the ball needs to take less time traveling from Will Levis' hand to the receiver than it takes for the defensive back to react to the route. Here's another example from the South Carolina game. This time he has this backside hook defender waiting in the passing window, but the ball just pops off his hand, and the defensive backs don't have time to react. And then the last element of Will Levis' arm talent is the ability to throw on the run. Liam Cohen, who was Kentucky's offensive coordinator in 2021, he came from the Rams, and they run a ton of play-action bootlegs. Will Levis was able to read the levels concepts down the sideline and deliver the ball accurately. This is a really impressive throw from the Florida game. He fakes the toss and then rolls out to his left. Not a tight window throw or anything, but it's still impressive that he's able to get his hips rotated this quickly.
I'll say this to a lot of the stuff that we're seeing right now, because this is in-depth film analysis. I don't do this because I just don't have the time. Plus, because I'm one of those people that believe I can learn anything. I'm not as well versed in film and I don't pretend to be. You know, I'm a fan. At the end of the day, there was somebody that commented, that left a comment on one of my latest videos, and they said, you know, that they are an expert in being a fan. And sometimes I feel like even I can get lost in the, you know, back and forth talk, because I think that there's in every prospect that's coming out of college on any level, you can see traits that could potentially work at the next level, right? You know, I've often made an argument. Some of you may agree with me, maybe not. But when I think about guys like, you could say Cam Newton, which personally I think Cam was more of a pocket passer than he was given credit for, or he was given weapons to be able to develop for. But guys like Robert Griffin, guys like Michael Vick, like, can you imagine if the RPO offense was as appreciated and as, like, welcomed in the NFL when Michael Vick came into the league? Oh, my gosh. How do you stop him? Because then they start building weapons around them in order for them to be successful. But I will say this at the same time. Guys like Michael Vick, guys like Cam Newton, they come into the league and offer you an opportunity. Like, I don't think that you have Anthony Richardson. I was talking to my boy Keeb, shout out to Keeb, my co-host. I was talking to him last night about this. I said, Keeb, Cam Newton birthed a whole new era of quarterbacks, not just from a race perspective, but from a body type, right? Because most of the time, if you saw a guy like Cam, my boy, I got a homeboy that lives in that Auburn area, and he told me this story. He said, man, when Cam first came to Auburn, you know, they saw him out on the field and he was flipping tractor tires with the offensive linemen. And they're like, you know, people are like, who's this new defensive end that we got? And they're like, oh, that's the quarterback. Like, what? Like, and if you've ever seen Cam in person, like, he's insane. Like, it's insane how tall, how just big of a dude he is, right? And so a guy like Anthony Richardson, even 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, there's no way a coach is going to tell him, like, hey, yeah, you can throw the ball. No, they are going to put that, he's going to be a linebacker. He'll be a linebacker, defensive end, tight end, any kind of skill position, not a quarterback. Why? Because of the more cerebral, you know, position. It's a more cerebral position, which it still is. That's not changed. But now you're seeing guys that can do so many different things, and NFL offenses are starting to cater to those specific skill sets. And that's why you get the Jalen Hurts. That's why you get the, you know, Anthony Richardsons. That's why you get the, you know, potential, you know, Will Levises and people like that, you know, or the Josh Allens or whatever like that, because these offenses are tailored around their specific strengths. Now, I will say this, though, and this is where the anomaly that is Josh Allen could potentially change drastically. Josh Allen said something going into minicamp just a couple of days ago. It might have been a week ago or something like that. Maybe some of you saw this, right? But there was a quote that came out where Josh Allen said, I'm going to change my playing style. And I was like, oh, boy. Because the very thing that makes you successful, guys like him, this is why I'm so much more pro Bryce or cerebral kind of guy. I would even say CJ for that matter. I don't care if CJ can't move around. Many people think that there's this misconception of like, oh, the athletic quarterback, you know, is like the dominant now. No, it's always been a thinking man's position. Always, right? So I'm not of the mindset of like, okay, let's go out and find the most athletic guy that can do both. Because the thing that you want to watch is this. Sometimes the running ability that you have will create open throwing lanes for you because of the threat, right? So if I'm Josh Allen and I'm telling you, hey, I'm not going to play as reckless, okay, well, then that must mean that you've developed mentally as well. Because if that hasn't changed and we were using play calling, creative concepts, notice there was a drop in production with Brian Daboll being gone last year, and you tell me that you're going to change your playing style at this point in your career this early, I'm telling you, watch for it. Because it's going to change how people evaluate quarterbacks. Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, all of these bigger super athletic guys are being are being scouted because of what you're seeing from Josh Allen. But if he has an extreme dip in production, and if that extreme dip in production comes as a result of him changing his playing style and taking away that threat, I'm telling you, it's going to change how people start looking at the position.
So Will Levis's arm talent is a 9 out of 10. He doesn't have a generational arm, but he can make every single throw necessary in an NFL offense, and he doesn't need a clean pocket or wide open receivers to deliver the ball accurately. That alone would have him on NFL teams' radars, but what's going to make him a first-round pick, in my opinion, is his ability to work through his progressions efficiently and operate concepts that NFL teams run. College coaches aren't designing their offenses to make it easy for NFL draft evaluators to project quarterbacks. They're trying to win college football games, and the way you do that a lot of times is RPOs, bubble screens, fake bubble screens, a lot of gimmicky stuff that just doesn't really translate to the NFL, and so it's rare that we see a quarterback with this level of arm talent that's already operated an NFL offense at a high level. One of their most effective concepts is called string. You run it to the 3 receiver side, and you get a dig route from the number 3, a hitch from the 2.
Let me speak to something real quick because I saw this comment. B.Chat, I want to speak to something you said. You said it's 2 separate points. Calling plays is important, but CJ didn't carry OSU like Cam carried that Auburn squad. So the physical attributes are far more disparate than just a prima facie comparison. Okay. I understand what you're saying, but I could argue that the very same thing that Cam done in college that was helpful for him transitioning to the NFL is the very thing that could have hurt him, right? Because if you take time, like, look, you can be the biggest Cam fan in the world, and you would have to acknowledge as a Cam fan, footwork has always been his biggest area of need and concern, right? But if I have that ability to take off and scamper right away, then what's the point of me developing it? I'm just going to be me. How many times do we hear Cam say, let me be Superman, right? So, like, it's not necessarily 2 different conversations because CJ doesn't have to be have to be athletic like that. But if he doesn't have that, then where does he compensate? What do you do? Like, Anthony Richardson can come into the league and use his athletic ability until he develops the very thing that he needs to be more successful, which is a more cerebral mindset to be able to read coverages and deliver the ball accurately. You know, and then not have a lot of drops too, because that's going to help his case as well. But if he didn't have that, what's the alternative? The alternative is that cerebrally, I got to get better faster. And you develop. And not for nothing, let me also say this. And thank you for commenting, bot chat. I'll also say this. In college, when you don't play for a made coach, I may have said this point, you know, maybe this might have been a point I said over the phone with a friend, but if I said it here, I'll reiterate it. When you're playing in the NFL or in college, prospecting yourself for the NFL, a lot of it is you showcasing your own abilities. It's not necessarily you being helped. Bryce Young was in a very unique situation, and this is the reason why I will say that we don't necessarily know if CJ could project to become what Bryce already is at this level. Here's why. Bryce had Bill O'Brien. Bryce had Nick Saban, made men as far as as far as coaching is concerned. Bill O'Brien, because of what he done with Brady, winning Super Bowls, all those kind of things, he's always going to get jobs in the NFL. Because of what he's done at Alabama, he's always going to get jobs in the NFL. And not for nothing, NFL coaches do not grow on trees. So even if he was the worst of the worst, he still would have an opportunity. I saw Greg Williams coaching in the XFL. To me, that's just a door for him to go right back into the position that he was in before. It might not be a head coach, but he'll always have a position in the NFL. So what do I mean by that? Okay, follow me. If I'm Dan Mullen, or some of these other coaches that know that I'm coaching for my job year after year because my program is not being as successful, what am I more prone to do? I'm only going to call plays that are going to help me win games. I'm not necessarily focused on calling plays to help you develop. And that's the difference. I think Bryce was given carte blanche to be able to be a coach on the field. Now, some of that came from what he showed behind the scenes, and they were like, okay, this kid can do that. So we're going to give him carte blanche to be able to do it. But I also think you have to take into consideration that Alabama is made. Like, they're going to be successful because of who's coaching them. When you're at a place like, you know, Tennessee, even with the new coach there, or Hupple, or, you know, whoever's at, I don't think it was Dan Mullen. I can't remember who the coach is at Florida or whatever. These guys, in most cases, I heard this about Matt Corral, right? Lane Kiffin and the RPO for Matt Corral was so specific because he was good at it. And it's the best thing that I can do to try and win games at this moment. I ain't got time to develop you, Matt Corral. You're not going to be here that long. I can't necessarily sit and spend time with you. I need you available now. I need you to win now. So I'm going to do what is necessary for us to win now. That's why you can never project guys like, remember when Dak Prescott came into the league, tore it up as soon as he got an opportunity? That may not be the case right now necessarily, but when he first came into the league, 13-3, got beat by Aaron Rodgers on an absolute dime that Aaron Rodgers threw to Jared. what's the tight end name? The South Carolina tight end. I can't remember his name. But, I mean, miraculous throw, miraculous catch to beat them in the, I want to say, divisional round, right? But that first season, 13-3, moved Tony Romo out of the way. Sure, Dak Prescott had an impressive, feat at Mississippi State, but nobody saw that coming. Not in the fourth round. Not coming out in the fourth round. You know what I'm saying? Development, coaching, all that stuff, it matters. Big time. Let's get back to it.
And then another dig from the 1. This backside safety bracket's the first dig route. The hook defender comes up and covers the hitch, and then he has a really short amount of time to hit this third dig route against outside leverage before the other safety is able to get in position. Here's another example from the Citrus Bowl. I was playing single high, so this inside dig route gets converted into a deep slant. He's got match coverage on this comeback route to the boundary, so he knows there's going to be a quick window to hit this first dig route before the linebacker is able to turn around. There's not a single quarterback coach in America that would teach this throwing motion, but it's the sort of thing that works for him consistently, so there's no reason to go away from it. Right here, Kentucky's running chains, which is basically McVay terminology for deep curls on third down. Mississippi State's in 2 high pre-snap, but they're rotating into cover 3. Will Levis goes 1 to 2 to 3 and hits the third curl route for the first.
I saw another comment I want to speak to real quick. CJ can't pass the test, though. Can't pass and not do well are two different things. What I will say is this. I did hear a story, and I don't know if this was about him. This sounds like it was more about Hendon Hooker than him. There was a quarterback, and not for nothing, I will say this about that. Layered language is important because sometimes things have deeper meaning, right? Let me give you an example. All right. Let's take you out of school for a minute. Biblical school, that is. There's a passage in the Bible that many of us know that says, train your child up in the way they should go, and when they get old, they won't depart from it. It sounds like a warning. It's actually, sounds like a charge. Hey, if you train them up this way, train them up in the ways of God, they'll never depart from that. It's not a charge, it's a warning. It comes from an old Hebrew idiom called the way of the mouth. So in other words, it sounds like a charge, right? But it's indeed a warning. If you allow your kids to continue in the way that they're going, right, then when they get older, they won't depart from it. So you should be trying to rear your child in the right direction. So when I heard this story and they said, hey, he was tired, and this isn't CJ necessarily. This is about somebody at the, during they called it All-Star Week, but they were talking about Senior Bowl. He was tired, got there late, took the test one time, didn't do well, came back and took it again. This was a clip that was shared with Pat McAfee, right? I may try to find that clip in a second and play it. But the point is that he was saying that the S2 cognition test scores were not authentic, that some of those were like, hey, that's not necessarily what happened here. You know what I'm saying? What the point is this. You could read that way, but you could also read it like this. And this is what I was talking about with layered language. You could also see that as being like, man, how's he going to be when it's like, when you're tired and, after a big game and you got, you don't need to watch film, or if somebody approaches you about this, that, or the third, or you got all this other stuff going on. That's what I'm talking about with the layered language. So it's one of those things that I feel like it could be a double entendre. It's like on one hand, it's like, yeah, he's tired. You want to make sure he's, up and at it when he's taking the test. But like for this one player specifically, and again, I think this was Hendon Hooker. I don't think it was CJ. But for this one player specifically, when they mentioned it, it sounded to me like they were saying two things at once. And both of those things could be true. He was tired, didn't necessarily get to take the test when he wanted to take the test, instead of having a time to prepare for it or whatever like that. But when he took it, it's one of those things like, hey, pop quiz, you need to be ready for it at the time that you take it. So it depends on how you want to take that. But to suggest that he can't pass the test, listen, the eye test, the field test, some guys are gamers, man. I don't think that it necessarily means with Bryce Young, I think it's one piece to the puzzle, but I don't think it's an end-all be-all if Bryce Young is going to be ultimately successful in the league. I don't think the S2 is – I think it's more about how fast you can process information, not if you can process information. And that can be something – look, how many players have we seen like, look, Bryce might be a guy that just comes in and he's like Rain Man and could just see stuff. I heard that about Andrew Luck. Photographic memory. Boom, 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 boom. You know what I'm saying? One after the other, he's able to see things, right? But like with CJ, it may take him a year or two for the game to slow down. But when it does, hey, he might go crazy. Let's keep going real quick.
First down. Will Levis is also comfortable working timing-based concepts. He can throw with anticipation over the middle of the field. He's really comfortable hitting backside concepts, and he has a good natural feel for where defenders are going to be on the other side of the field. The problem with Will Levis, though, and the thing that's keeping him outside of the top 5 on my board, is that he's extremely careless with the football. In 2 years starting at Kentucky, he turned the ball over 32 times, 13 interceptions in 2021, and 10 interceptions last year. This first play, Kentucky's running dunk, where you have a clear out seam from the number 3, and this is really only supposed to be an alert. If you get cover 2 with the safeties playing with a ton of width, or if you get cover 3 and the deep safety bites on something over the middle, then you could hit this seam route for an easy touchdown. But both of these safeties bracket the vertical route, and he just tries to will this throw into existence. Next play, they're running Comet to the field side with a sluggo on the boundary. This first concept's completely covered, and Will Levis just doesn't recognize the backside safety, so he lofts up an easy interception. And then on this play against Chattanooga, he gets tricked by a
Man,
crazy
Q, I hope
formation.
not.
The defense is in split safety, but they're
I
rotating
hope
to
not,
inverted
bro.
Tampa 2 with these outside corners taking the deep halves, and then the Will linebacker playing the deep middle. And Will Levis has the exact same problem here, where his first concept isn't open, so he goes to this fade route on the backside, not realizing that there's a defender waiting for the interception. This is a really bad read from the South Carolina game. Kentucky's running dagger, which is a go route or deep post from the number 2, and then a dig route from the number 1. And this inside vertical route clears out the 2 deep defenders, and then you got a dig route against outside leverage coming wide open over the middle of the field. But instead, Will Levis decides to throw it into double coverage, and it gets intercepted.
See, and that's what I'm talking about. Like that one play right there, we saw that from Sam Darnold a lot. And to me, that's when people ask, what's the difference between, like, why would you want the 5'10" guy, right? It's because his quick twitch and decision-making makes those plays quicker than other guys can process and develop those plays, right? So, like, you know, some of it is because of how long the route was, and he didn't have a lot of control. That's another thing. That's another variable of this. How much control are you having pre-snap? Because pre-snap isn't necessarily what you read, because you can know where you need to go with the ball pre-snap and not have the control to do that. What do I mean? Hey, man, play within the confines of the offense. Anybody remember the Rams game last year when P.J. Walker started? You would have thought P.J. was a high school quarterback playing in the NFL. Why is this guy out here? Because he done what they told him to do. And I think that sometimes that can put guys in shackles. So I'm going to do what you tell me to do. I'm not going to read anything pre-snap, but the result may not be what you want. Something to think about.
The interception from the Georgia game isn't as much of a bad read. I think he just misjudged where his receiver was. I've seen him make this throw before, so again, it's understandable that he would be overconfident in his arm, but he doesn't get enough air on this pass, and Keely Ringo is able to get an interception. You'll see with a lot of these interceptions, the common theme is being too trusting of what the defense is doing on the backside of the play. Right here against Iowa, the corner's sitting on this comeback route. Will Levis doesn't get it outside enough, and the receiver kind of cuts off his route. With players like Will Levis, it's really difficult to predict how they're going to turn out in the NFL, but the evaluation is actually pretty simple. If he's able to eliminate or at least limit the turnovers, he's probably going to be a successful NFL quarterback, but that's a really big if. We've seen quarterbacks like Josh Allen improve in that area, but there have been plenty of quarterbacks with turnover issues in college that aren't able to fix that issue at the next.
Yes, Sam Darnold. There have been plenty of quarterbacks at the college level that come into the NFL and are not able to change the fact that they are turnover prone. Jameis Winston, Sam Darnold. This can't be life right now, y'all. This can't be life. I like you guys think that it's just, you know, well, I hope you guys are thinking like this, that it's just coincidental that the Vegas odds change and the same day that they probably knew that the press conference was coming or whatever like that, but how many of us thought without question that Mac Jones was going to be the guy for San Francisco and they drafted Trey Lance? I was one of those. I thought it was Mac Jones. I really did. I did. I saw a tweet earlier today where the Arizona Cardinals had told Josh Rosen, this was from their verified team account, and they told Josh Rosen, you're our guy. And they drafted Kyler and sent him packing. So I keep seeing a lot of people that are, you know, Jonathan Jones, who used to be a guy that, you know, reported for us. I think he's with the Texans now, and many others. Panthers on Tap. I think his name's Curtis, a guy I had the pleasure of doing a live with PNP. I've seen those guys adamant about it being Bryce Young. Adamant about it. At the end of the day, I think we have to realize one thing. It's a harsh realization, but this decision comes down to one person. Regardless of what we're being told and fed in the media, oh, you know, he's not going to really be involved. Do remember, I like coaches that look like me, that dress like me. I would hope that the reports that I heard of, I had dinner with this certain quarterback's family, or really like this guy, and all the stuff that we saw at the pro days and all that kind of stuff would be more true. But man, if it's not, man, I know this. You want to talk about one epic night of content, because the rest of the draft won't even matter. We all will be going nuts. I laugh thinking about it. Internally, that is. To keep from crying. Let's finish this out.
Level. I also want to mention how Will Levis's stat line is pretty misleading when it comes to his overall evaluation. His numbers declined in pretty much every area from 2021 to 2022, and I know a lot of people sort of roll their eyes at supporting cast arguments for quarterbacks, because theoretically, if you're spending a top 10 pick on a quarterback, he would be able to will a college offense to being successful. But when you watch the 2022 Kentucky tape, there's almost never anywhere for Will Levis to go with the football. Defensive backs were just plastered to Kentucky's receivers, and his offensive line wasn't very good. He was one of the most pressured quarterbacks in college football. But with all of that, he was still standing in the pocket and trying to make these throws. There just wasn't anyone open for him to throw to. And so I'll admit, when I first saw his box score, I'm thinking, how are people viewing him as a first-round pick? He threw 19 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, but he had so many drops and really just no help from his surrounding core or his offensive coordinator. It seemed like every time Kentucky was able to hit a big play in the passing game this year, they immediately ran the ball 3 times and just went into super conservative mode and never really let Will Levis get into any sort of rhythm.
And that right there, I think that's why, if you're going to view this from their perspective and say, okay, why would they even be thinking this? That context has to matter. That has to matter. Regardless of what we think, regardless of how we feel about it, that context has to matter. 19 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Offensive coordinator didn't help you out. Ton of drops. Remember what I said before. I don't care about developing you, kid. Go win me football games. Some of them will be so arrogant as to think, hey, I don't care what your skill set is. You're going to run the offense that I run. Forget building around you and being, I don't know, having some common sense. You're going to do what I want you to do based on what I've learned and the concept. Because here's the reality, guys. Many of you probably know this in life. Very few people are willing to change. Very, very few. Those that do typically experience a lot of rough patches when they're changing, when they're making those adjustments, right? But the ones that stick it out, again, they become the 1%. They become the Belichicks. They become the Sabans, Don't believe me? Go back and look at some of the quarterbacks. One of the things that I read about Bryce Young yesterday when I was doing the mock draft, Bryce Young, it's surprising for him being a quarterback that's this good from Alabama that didn't win a national championship. What does that tell you? Change. Nick Saban knew. You want to know the moment he knew? When Dabo came. When Dabo came and beat you twice, right? Now, it's not to say that he hadn't gotten back since, because he has. But the point is that I have to evolve. Gone are the days where I can plug in A.J. McCarron, Jake Coker, Greg McElroy, or any of these other guys. I have got to evolve. So who did he go hire? Lane Kiffin. Who came behind him? Steve Sarkisian. Who after him? Bill O'Brien. What is he telling you? I'm willing to change. And some of these guys at these other programs are not willing to do that. Part of it is because they're not made. They can't do it. You got to win now, because if not, this AD is going to come down here and tell me I got to go to the other school across the street because you're not getting it done here. So that's why when people like Mel Kiper, I'm not saying Mel Kiper's right, but when guys like Mel Kiper scout these guys, they're taking this kind of stuff into consideration, because there has to be some context. I'm not shooting Will Levis bail for him to be our quarterback, because you guys know I don't want that. But I think we also have to remember that there is some context to this situation. This is part of it.
Draft grade for Will Levis is a 7.21, which equates to about the 10th overall pick in an average draft class. He's my 4th ranked quarterback and my 9th overall player. And I understand the hesitancy to turning over your franchise to Will Levis, but the way that people are talking about him is kind of crazy to me. There's this idea that it would just be insane for a team to spend a 1st round pick on Will Levis. But when you watch the tape, the 1st round traits and skills are impossible to miss. And as with pretty much every quarterback, it's going to come down to his own work ethic and development and the situation that he gets drafted to. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe. Also, let me know in the comments any NFL draft prospects that you'd like me to cover. Interesting
stuff. And so I'm going to go through, check out a couple of the comments because I haven't really had a chance to look at what you guys were saying here. So I'm going to back up just a tad. Let's see. Kendall Cheryl says loud for Stroud. Salute. Conseco says, John, that just speaks to not trusting the pre-draft rumors. I agree. Corey Davis says 9. I'm with you, bro. Jamie Harris says, I have absolute certainty that if any team will screw this up, it's us. Mark my words, people. You got to have more faith, man. Josh, I'm with you. I don't trust anything this time of year. It's hard not to, but you got to, I mean, we got to read into some of this stuff, you know, like not everything, but, you know, chew the meat and spit out the bones. My boy Elliot says, we see how that turned out. Hang on, let me shorten this down so we can see your whole comment. All right. Says, we see how that turned out. At the end of the day, the fit matters most, which brings me to this. Who do you think out of the 4 or 5 QBs in this draft best fits with Frank Reich's scheme? So let me stay on that one for a minute. I don't know, Elliot. And here's why. Because Frank Reich has never drafted a quarterback. Frank Reich has only inherited what's already been there. When he was with Philadelphia, it was Carson Wentz and Nick Foles. When he went to Indianapolis, it was Andrew Luck for all of, I think he may have had Andrew Luck for a season, right? And then Luck retires, and then he's got Jacoby, and he's got Phillip Rivers. Then he had Carson Wentz, you know? So we don't really know what Frank Reich's specialty would be. How are we to know that Frank Reich wouldn't have been one of the people that was pounding sand for Russell Wilson? We don't know. But if we're going off of what he's been successful with and we're going off of what we've seen, I would say that it probably would be a guy closer to the Levis or Stroud persuasion. It's just hard to tell. I saw that too, Drip. Will Levis going around telling people the Panthers said they was not going to draft Bryce but him. I did see that. Dwight Howard says, so the Panthers drafting Levis. How's China, bro? My boy DB said, remember they said AR-15 got a crib in North Carolina. Conjecture. I don't believe it. Bot Chat said, I'm not sure we know what our scheme is going to actually look like once it's mature, so it's a hard call. That makes sense. Now, I saw this last night, and I heard an interview on this or sort of a dialogue on this, man. And I got to be honest with you. When you look at how C.J. Stroud has been treated in the media lately with all the, you know, crazy stuff that we've been seeing in terms of, you know, S2 cognition and all this kind of stuff, man, I got to believe that there's a good chance that if this stuff was leaked and it was wrong, like if CJ Stroud, I think it might be right now the reason why this isn't coming out is because they're waiting to see how the draft plays out, right? But I got to believe that there's people in his ear that are telling him like, you know what, if you want to do this, I would guess that CJ would probably take the high road, you know, and just be like, yeah, whatever. I'm not worried about that. But if he doesn't, and suppose that he doesn't, suppose that he's like, you know what, I don't like how my name was sullied, then I could very much see legal action coming into play. Because, I mean, I know many people would be like, man, whatever, just let it go. But, like, you really are, I mean, you're talking about a difference of thousands of dollars, potentially millions of dollars, depending on how far you drop. I don't think CJ is going to drop that far. But I will say this, even for the CJ guys, this is something that you got to take into consideration. There are many people, many scouts that have spoken. I can't say who definitively. I ain't got no sources, so don't act like it's me. But, like, when I go through, like, many of you go through the Twitter timeline and you just see random stuff out there, whatever like that. I've seen people on TV say that the Georgia game is what's catapulted C.J. Stroud to this point. That had it not been for that game, he didn't necessarily have the top 10 grade. I don't know that I agree with that. I'm just saying the stuff that I see out there. Just going through and read. Twan says NIL is and that transfer is getting ready to make them change their ways. I can agree with that. Someone who's closest to Andrew Luck, probably Levis. I would disagree. If you want to say from a physical body type, then yes. But if we're talking cerebrally, only cerebrally, please understand when I say this, have context. Cerebrally, the closest thing to Andrew Luck would be Bryce Young from the thinking and the ability to be able to process perspective. This is the most craziest name. Black African Thumper. Says they bought Bruce a home in Charlotte. I like it. Leo Port says the issue with CJ is based on his religious beliefs. What does that have to do with anything? If anything, I could say that's the thing that holds him down. We either Bryce or Richardson. I agree. I've thought about AR a lot and what that would look like. And I've said this before. You know, AR scares me because, as I mentioned with Josh Allen, he's an anomaly. He's not something that you see often, right? Not just from the physical perspective, like, yes, he's a unicorn in that perspective. But you don't normally see guys that have, like, this is just as much an anomaly with Anthony Richardson as anything else. Many may not want to say it this way. But, like, it's just as much an anomaly that Anthony Richardson is talked about in the top 10 of quarterbacks with 53% completion percentage. Drops are usually never accounted into this kind of stuff. It's usually not even a conversation, right? And, I mean, the only reason that Cam was that year, I think Cam was like at 59-60, right, or whatever. But what Cam was doing on the field was ridiculous, like catching receiving touchdowns, rushing, throwing passing touchdowns. I think he accounted for like 50-some-odd touchdowns, 30 passing, 20-some-odd rushing or whatever. I didn't see that from Richardson at all, right? So the Cam comparison from a physical perspective, sure, you can say that. But, like, you just don't normally see the guys in college that have, like, a low, like, completion percentage, whether it's through drops or whatever, be mentioned in the top 10, the top 5 even, But, again, when you're looking at what you see with Josh Allen, when you just saw what you saw with Jalen Hurts, and not for nothing, go look at Jalen Hurts' stat line coming out of Oklahoma. Jalen Hurts was slept on, right? But this guy's an anomaly for many reasons, not just that reason, right? For his unicorn attributes or whatever like that. But I will say this, as I said before, if he can develop, if he has that Josh Allen type of trajectory, oh boy, like I said, you're talking about one of the best quarterback talents in the history of the NFL, because there hasn't been anything like him. The throwing motion, the breakaway speed, the 40-yard dash speed, the elusiveness, the shiftiness inside the pocket. I mean, look, I would be able to stomach more them drafting him over Will. I really would. I'm not going to be one of these fans that's like, yo, I'm quitting the team, I'm never following again. Like, nah, that's not me. But, man, I'm telling you, I said that there was something I wouldn't do. And I promise this. I said that if we were to draft Stroud and Young went to the Texans, and I wouldn't be the guy that would be like, yo, we should have drafted Bryce Young, or vice versa. If we draft Bryce Young and Stroud goes and absolutely balls out with the Texans or balls out with the Colts or whatever, I would not be the guy that would be like, yo, we should have drafted Stroud. I'm going to sink with the ship. Hey, that was my pick. I'm not going to be fake. Y'all got me on camera. You got me recorded. Like, I can't do it, right? But, man, if we draft Levis and Levis struggles, I can assure you, on everything I love, on this app, I will be insufferable on here about who we should have drafted. Insufferable. That's just me. Go back through some of these comments real quick, and I'm going to get out of here, man. Scott Yang says that CJ, his S2 score was fabricated. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? Young does talk about his religious beliefs too. Listen, y'all know me, man. I am not ashamed of the gospel on any level. How is it going, One Carolina? It can be tough being a Panthers fan. I have a Panthers tag on the front of my car, and I've already had some guys point at it and laugh, and another person gave me a thumbs down. In public? That's corny. Where do you live? If you live in Atlanta, New Orleans, or Tampa, I can understand it. But, man, I used to have this. So back in, story time. Probably, let's see. Before I really got into doing this, my hobby was flipping cars. Like, I love cars, man. I've been a car guy since, early on. My brother had some super, super nice cars when I was growing up. And when I say super nice, I ain't talking about super cars. Like, we wasn't, no Lamborghinis or nothing crazy like that. But like old schools, I like old school cars. And I remember the first time I got a Panther tag. As a matter of fact, I got it for because I'm from North Carolina originally. I live in South Carolina now, but I'm from North Carolina. And I had one of the 5 different Caprices that I've owned throughout my life. And so one of them was super cold, man. It was Carolina blue, nice wheels on it, and I bought a Panther tag for it. And then I used that tag when I would you're not supposed to do this, but like I would use that tag if I was transporting a car that I just bought that I was going to flip or whatever like that. And I remember, and I've got a picture somewhere of this. I had a 1973 Buick Centurion. Let's see if I can find a picture of that real quick. But I had this 1973 Buick Centurion, and I had a Panthers tag on it. Super cold, man. Loved that car. But never got that same kind of heat, man, because I used to spend a lot of time up in Boone, North Carolina. And anytime I would go up there, especially when I had the Caprice with the Panthers tag on it, man, I'd always, as a matter of fact, the exact opposite would happen to me. And I would always get pulled over and people would be like, man, like, where'd you get that tag from? I'm like, I'm the DMV. But they would always give me like kudos about it. So, yeah, I hate you had that experience, man, but that certainly was not mine. Jay Issue said, I can't imagine. I can't either, man. And that's another reason why I think his faith is important, man, because, you would not having and not being rooted in something that you believe in would make you want to lash out in a situation like that. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, where is that coming from? Like, I've been nothing but a model citizen. I've been, somebody that's, portrayed myself in a positive light. Like, why would you be trying to destroy, the very thing that I'm getting ready to use to help, take my family life to another level? Like, CJ Stroud is getting ready to change his entire generation, with this, if he plays it right, of course, but if he, plays the money, uses the money correctly, like, his entire generation moving forward will be changed as a result of, what he's getting ready to do. So sure, I can't imagine how he's feeling in this moment. And yes, I do agree. Bryce is 100% an outlier. Yes, he is, without question. Macho Man says, CJ says, CJ silence through this manner campaign tells you already he's the guy. I don't know if I agree with that. I don't want to body shame Young. I think he's a brilliant quarterback, but Baker Mayfield's 8 batted ball game is fresh in my mind, and he's shorter than Mayfield. Okay. Well, I do this often, at least one time per live, but let's go ahead and debunk that. So Baker Mayfield is 6 foot tall and had 8 batted passes. Justin Herbert is 6'5", 6'6", and led the league in batted passes. And we had a quarterback that was 5'11", the closest comp to Bryce Young in the entire league, and he did not struggle with it at all, named P.J. Walker. So if that can give you any kind of restitution, hope that it does. Yes, my man Elliot says, hit that like button. Thank you so much for that. Ken Montez said, if we draft Will, I am done. I understand it, man. I get it. Carolina Pride says, prefer Bryce, but I will say if the staff gets their hands on Richardson, every other team in the NFC should be terrified the day he finally starts. I'm not going to be in disagreement because, like I said, I mean, we almost, like, we literally almost tripped and fell into a division title last year. And I don't think there's not enough, like the one team, if you had to look from a, peripheral view, if there was one team that I could say that would be a team that would be the closest to making that big of a jump because of the coaching staff, right, and the existing players on the roster, right, I would say it would be us. we can make that transition pretty quickly. I don't think any of the other teams, because I think with Atlanta, Arthur Smith, man, if they start 0-2, he's going to be on the hot seat. And that whole thing could end up blowing up, especially if they decide to draft the offensive lineman or if they draft, defense or whatever direction that they go, because they don't want to start a quarterback because they believe in Desmond Ridder. But if you ask me, I think the closest to the lie, if you will, in this draft of a team saying that, hey, he's our guy, sort of like Josh Rosen with Arizona, would 100% be Atlanta saying that Desmond Ridder is their guy. I don't believe that. And if they are, and AR or Levis or any, I would much rather take like I said, in last year's draft, even with Corral. I like Corral, but in last year's draft, if Will Levis was in that draft, he probably would have been the first quarterback taken. Says a few more checkdowns and AR percentage would have risen by 10%. I think I saw that somewhere. Jake Willis say, ain't no way we drafting Levis. Black African Thumper says, man, I can't. That name is just. AR-15 gonna be Bryce Young's backup. Scott Yang says, I'm pounding it loud for Stroud. I was never on the Bryce train. There's a few words in that sentence that I would probably be careful using together. Pounding it loud. Yeah. Josh says, big facts, John. I'm sinking with the ship. Me too, man. Me too. Elliot said, weeping and gnashing of teeth if we get Levis and he don't work out. Buddy, you talk about it. I don't think y'all understand this. Let's talk about this for a second. I don't think that this is the single most important draft in the history of the Carolina Panthers. But I will say this. It could turn into that. Do you realize, I said this before. I remember playing this clip from Chris Sims. And he was talking about Anthony Richardson, right? And I think you could say the same for Will Levis in this situation. You can say this for Anthony Richardson or Will Levis, one or the other. He said, if you take a chance on drafting Will Levis or Anthony Richardson with the first overall pick, you better hope it works. If you're Scott Fitterer, you better hope it works. If you're David Tepper, it don't matter. How long did we see? And I know a lot of people be like, oh, make him sell the team. As long as David Tepper doesn't do, if he keeps everything clean from a business perspective, David Tepper don't ever have to sell this team. The reason Washington's being sold is not because they're losing, it's because their owners are creep. Like, it has nothing to do with anything like that. It's the same reason that Jerry Richardson had to sell the team, because of stuff that was coming out about what was happening behind closed doors. It ain't had nothing to do with wins or losses. But what I will say is that, obviously his face card out in Charlotte is going to change, drastically. You got to give him credit for being able to go out there and at least, shooting for the fences. I do love that about him. And I'm going to give him his flowers as far as that's concerned, because I do like the moves. He was extremely aggressive. Realize I made a mistake with Matt Rule going out, hiring Frank Reich and this incredible staff that we have right now, on paper anyway, but even with what we've seen from them in the past, it looks like we have an incredible staff moving forward, right? That could flip this team overnight, seemingly. It won't be the first time it's ever happened. Look at San Francisco back in 2012. But the point I'm making is this. If you take a chance, you got two guys that are consensus number one picks by most analysts and stuff like that. That would be Bryce and CJ, right? And if you take a chance on AR, if you take a chance on Will Levis, then you better be right. And within 3 to 4 years of that pick, it's got to work out. Because if it doesn't, and you see these two guys battling it out in the AFC, or, because I like to think this. I think that if CJ or Bryce end up on an NFC team, depending on where they land, you could see these guys make some major moves fairly quickly, right? And if you saw that happen and you went the other way because you want to try to outsmart the process, thinking that you can develop something that may not necessarily be developable, if that's even a word, man, you talking about it. That's a career ender. That is a potential career ender. You're talking about, like, there's other teams, like, sure, I know many people will be like, oh man, of course there's other teams that will hire them. Not quickly, not that quickly at all. Especially the worst thing for a lot of these old head coaches is these new guys starting to tear it up in the league. The Nick Siriannos, you know, Brandon Staley getting to the playoffs out in LA, even though you could argue that maybe he shouldn't be there anymore. But like a lot of these newer guys are starting to get opportunities. And Sean McVay, you know, what's my man in Cincinnati? Their coach, you know, and you could, if you want to argue that Burrow's the reason, okay, that's fine. But the fact is he's the coach. But the point I'm making is this. Some of the older guys, some of these older heads, and I'm going to tell you the most important one, Scott Fitterer, right? Because you would be looking at Scott Fitterer for a couple of reasons. Number one, some of these drafts, like I know that some of these guys haven't developed yet. You know, I've been, you know, pounding the table to see Brandon Smith develop. I've been pounding the table to see Amari Barno develop. But like some of these other guys, man, like there's guys that you didn't even really give a chance to. You know, Troy Pride Jr. got one chance and he's gone. Stanley Thomas Oliver never really got a chance. You know, now you could argue that he didn't, you know, earn the chance. If you want to make that argument, I'm okay with that. But like Keith Taylor, you know, I know he was thrown into the fire, but, you know, you would hope that this year would be the year that he would develop. You traded picks, traded assets for C.J. Henderson, and he has looked awful. You drafted J.C. Horn, and Patrick Surtain was there. And J.C. Horn, in my opinion, when healthy, is one of the best corners in the league. When healthy, right? So if you're Scott, you got to get this right. Or there may not be a GM opportunity for you anymore. You may end up going from GM to scout. You know, that's something to consider. That's why I've always been careful about speaking on him personally. I may not want him as a quarterback, but speaking against him on a personal level, taking personal shots, I ain't doing it, bro. And the reason is because what if he does that for Atlanta? What if he does that for Tampa? Then what? So I'm careful about how I speak on that man's name, but at the same time, do I want him? No. But I would hope that if they do draft him, that's the plan, for him to ball out. Panthers rule, Caprice. Listen, that is my all-time favorite car. My favorite cars that I've ever owned. I've had a Caprice the only year Caprice I didn't have was the bubble. I had a 77, and that was the year that they first like kind of formed them into the box. I had a 83, a 85, and an 89. And then I didn't have a bubble, but I did have a 95 Impala SS, which I wish I still had. But yeah, great car. High Point, North Carolina in the house. That's what's up. Boone is super country. I agree. Twan said, let's just grab Stetson Bennett and call it a day. Man, and I'm sorry, listen, Scott Yang with the super chat. I'm behind on my chat, man. Scott Yang with the 199 says, the McAfee show story behind the S2 score. You know what? I'm going to see if I can find that. And because I saw that clip too. And I want to see that again for myself. Let me see if I can find that really quick. Because I thought that was very interesting. Just to make sure that, you know, context is provided with that S2 situation. Give me 1 second here. Let's see. I saw that just yesterday. Because they were talking about how, let me see. There was a lot of context that was left out of that situation. Okay, here it goes. All right, I'm going to play this in just a second. Let's do it. All right, so here's that tweet from the Pat McAfee show yesterday where I think one of the owners of the S2 test talked about how that whole situation worked out.
Money, if somebody's going to be able to bounce back quickly, like, is that not something?
Dude, listen, if you gave me 8 hours with an athlete, we could get through all of that. We literally get 45 minutes.
Oh, really?
So
you could figure out, hey, hold on, though. That's a big deal. You could figure out whether or not somebody is going to be like a shitbird or a great person?
Well, so here's what I will say. We've been trying to predict human behavior since the beginning of time. Turns out we suck at it, right?
That's
so
why I was surprised.
We can give you a lot of really meaningful information. So we're just talking about the NFL here, right? We work in 35 to 40 professional sports across 5 organizations. We work in the military, Air Force, law enforcement. I can tell you right now, we can capture a law enforcement's agent's proclivity for certain behaviors, but until he's got a gun against him on the other side, we have no idea how he's going to act or react. Same thing with these literally 21-year-old athletes going to the next level. We can try our hardest to capture exactly the way these guys are wired, but until that guy is full speed with 300-pound linemen crushing him, we've got no idea how he's going to react.
See,
I completely agree with that. And that's why, and this wasn't the clip. I'm going to go back to the other clip as well, where he talked about CJ specifically. But I'm glad I played that clip because that kind of context matters. That's why the tape is so important. The tape, you can never get away from the tape, man. And I think sometimes these things, the NFL is a multi-billion-dollar industry. You know, I saw something today where a guy that I respect, you know, I respect this guy a lot, but he said something that I thought was very interesting, and I didn't agree with it. And I think you can still respect people and not agree with their opinions. But he said he was laughing about Shannon Sharpe and Shannon Sharpe's reaction to LeBron scoring last night. And he was like, I can't imagine being a man being that infatuated with another man. And I was thinking to myself, like, that's so weird because he works with quarterbacks. Like, you are employed by a business that is ran by people who want to be excited about watching these people and sometimes act irrational doing it. So you might not have a job if it didn't work that way. You know what I'm saying? So I thought that was very interesting. But the tape never lies. Like the tape, it's a $1 billion industry, so we get a lot of the theatrics that happen. I mean, even my show, you know, and people watching right now, like it's all theatrics to leading up to one moment, right? And so what I mean by that is this. You know, we see the pro days, man, and the simulations, and every year we get a new excuse as to why this pro day was better than the other. Man, look at how the layered throws were going with CJ, or look how, you know, AR ripping that football, you know, and everything like that. But what does the tape say? Because the tape showed us last year that Malik Willis was not ready. And now you got the Titans releasing information, sources releasing information saying that they're lost faith in Malik Willis. And there were many people that I remember many of us were saying, not us, I ain't gonna say me, but it was a lot of us that was out there saying that Malik Willis should be the 8th overall pick, if I'm just keeping it a buck. But anyway, my thing is this. I'm like, listen, this stuff comes out from somewhere, but the tape is going to tell us everything. So trust it. If it's telling us, why not trust it? But let's listen to what he says here. I think this one is the one about CJ.
You guys wanted at all. Where do the leaks come from, you think? Are the leaks accurate? And what should we take from that particular leak?
Yeah, so I will say from the outset here that, the day that happened, that those leaks happened, my phone was blowing up from general managers and our attorney. And so we can't speak on specifics. What I will say is the list of scores that I have seen, 2 of those scores are not accurate. They're not accurate at all. And some of the reason could be for narrative purposes. The other reason is that they don't have context. So somebody could have gotten a list of very early scores. One of the athletes on that particular list, I know, had a difficult time making his way to the All-Star game. Things were delayed. He was in high demand. He was hungry, tired. It was 11 p.m., didn't want to do what he was frustrated. We administered the test because we're asked to. We knew at that point in time, hey, we'll get you again. We'll get you at your pro day, your 30 visit. We did that, and his score is significantly higher than what is being reported in the media.
Okay.
So I'm just saying that. I'm not saying that it was CJ Stroud.
Okay. Yeah, you're not saying. Got
just that for context purposes, the scores that were leaked, there are a couple of them that are inaccurate, and there needs to be context behind that.
Okay, which we appreciate that piece of information because you're very new to the world. I think what the Cowboys and Saints were doing way back in the day is obviously smart.
Yeah.
Let's keep this exclusive. Let's keep it in-house. The fact that it's kind of getting more open there, I think there's a lot of owners and a lot of GMs that are very happy about this. And as we continue to learn about your test here, I think it's better for all parties. So we got to remember whenever shit gets leaked, there's a reason.
I want to scroll back to something that he said because I talked about this earlier. And remember what I said about layered language. Somebody disliked when I said that, and I'm okay with that because I ain't always here for you to agree with me. But I want to pose a potential idea. And for those who are in the Stroud camp, right, I want to pose a potential idea. And I'll do the same thing for Bryce. I'm going to play this again, just this one part.
Didn't want to do what he was frustrated. He was in high demand. He was hungry, tired. It was 11 p.m. Didn't want to do what he was frustrated. We administered the test because we're asked to. I'm
playing that part again.
Making his way to the All-Star game. Things were delayed. He was in high demand. He was hungry, tired. It was 11 p.m. Didn't want to do what he was frustrated. We administered the test because we're asked to. We knew at that point in time, hey, we'll get you again.
They administered the test because they had to. But listen to the key words. He was hungry, tired. It was 11 p.m., frustrated. Here's the question I want to ask, because I don't think that this is about Stroud because it wouldn't make sense for the timing. But I do want to ask this question. They shouldn't, I agree, Josh, they shouldn't do that to anyone. I don't disagree. I don't disagree at all. But if the narrative has existed about one guy's test, and again, please hear me out. I'm not saying that this is about Stroud. How are we to know, without him telling us the truth about this, if those conditions did not exist for every prospect that took this test? And how do we know that there's not a direct correlation to the S2 test to a team that is testing a prospect with not just this test, but his reaction to when the test is administered? How do we know that? How do we know that Will, Anthony, Bryce, CJ, Hendon, anybody that took that test, the regular kid from Yale, or any of these other guys, how do we know that their test wasn't administered similarly in that same fashion? And maybe they had a different reaction than the person that they're talking about right here. Because that may make a difference. That may be a reason why someone like Mike Lombardi says what he said publicly. I'm not saying that it's true. I'm not even saying that it's fair. I think it's completely unfair. But what I'm saying is that's something to be taken into consideration. That's a piece of context as to why some of this stuff may be being said. Because with that frustration, who knows what's said with that frustration? Who knows? Again, I'm not saying that this is true. I'm not saying that it was Stroud. Clearly, they're not saying that it was Stroud. Again, I think because of the timing, it sounds more like Hendon Hooker. But I'm just posing that question. Red Sun says, good point. They want to see how these guys handle that pressure because that's coming. That kind of pressure, different pressure situations. Let me tell you something. My opinion on this only, my opinion only. There's a reason why multiple quarterbacks fail in New York. They finally got somebody who is battle tested to play for the Jets. Not the Giants, the Jets. They got a battle-tested guy. They've been waiting for a franchise quarterback since the last person that wore 12. And now he's getting ready to bring that 12 out of the rafters. Although I'd like to see him wear 8 like the college number, but it would be really cool to see another Jets player wear number 12. But the point is that media will eat you alive. And if you are not ready for it, Zach Wilson, you won't survive. Sam Darnold, Chad Pennington. You can make an argument with Pennington, it was more injury. Brett Favre. Notice he got out of Dodge real quick. Because they'll eat you alive. I'm convinced that if Zach Wilson came to a place like Carolina where he could cultivate talent, yeah, sure, he got to worry about us. You know what I'm saying? And the stuff that we say, but what we say is not nearly the kind of, because the Jets have been waiting for a quarterback for so many years. And I fear that if this decision is screwed up, that's going to be us. If we screw this decision up, we will be that team that is always looking for a franchise quarterback. I think we have a prime opportunity right now. If you're telling me, if you're the AR guy out there, if you're a Levis guy out there, if you're telling me that they're going to draft that guy, then I would hope that they would not listen to anything that we have to say, because most of us are going to be clamoring for that guy to start right away because of where he was picked. I would hope that there's a succession plan, and that succession plan's name is Andy Dalton, even if it's for a year, because I believe personally, all things considered, in this division, we win this division with as current constructed. This ain't even counting with this coaching staff. We saw what Wilkes did, bro. Look at what Wilkes did when he got the opportunity and let guys play. Terrace Marshall, Deontay Foreman, you know what I'm saying? And Brady Christensen in his rightful position. And look what happened. Barring a bogus penalty against DJ Moore, we walk into the playoffs. And none of this is happening because we're probably drafting in the 15 somewhere, right? Maybe they still find a way to move up. But the point I'm making is that I don't want to be in the position, if you're going to draft that guy, develop him. Give him time if he's one of these projects. If it's Bryce and you don't think Bryce is ready, give him time. One thing you will know on my platform that I will beat the chair, the table, and tear down the house for. I will always be in favor of giving the quarterback time. Why? Because many of us don't think about the future. We're only worried about the now. If we were worried about the now, we would never have Patrick Mahomes because he would have struggled so much earlier, it could have killed his confidence. Go let him tell you. Don't listen to me. Let him tell you. Let him tell you how Alex Smith taught him how to line up behind center because he spent 99% of his time in shotgun in college. Let him tell you how he couldn't read a Mike linebacker coming out of college. Go listen to him on the shop after winning the first Super Bowl saying that, man, I just learned how to read defense. And people thought he was lying. How did that happen? Development. I'm off my soapbox. Thank y'all for listening. Let's go back to comments. New York media is brutal. Twan know. If there's anybody in this chat that know, it's two people. My boy Keeve and my boy Twan. Brutal. Bryce and CJ both need time. Dalton almost got to the Saints into the playoffs. That's a fact. I ain't saying nothing. Somebody said why Big Jordan did flip. Who was that? Jay Issue. Yes, he did. Ask him who flipped him. If he show up in the chat, that's one of my mods. Ask him who flipped him. That's my dog. He was my dog even if he didn't flip. But ask him who flipped him. 81 of y'all in the chat, man. 51 likes. I appreciate y'all, you know, on this random Tuesday. But, man, I'm getting ready to get out of here, man. I have had an excellent time. I appreciate y'all for showing up. It is always an honor to chop it up and talk football with y'all, man. Look, we got 2 days to the draft. I don't know if my guys are still in the chat, but the Black Cat Panther podcast, catch me there tomorrow. I will be there tomorrow at 7 p.m. just talking about, you know, leading up to the draft. I'm super excited, man. I can't wait. You know, it's going to be a very, very good conversation with those guys over there, man. And, yeah, we got one more day, man. One more day, and this is finally over. I don't know about y'all, but, like, I don't usually get tired of this kind of stuff. But, I said this before. I don't want to be here again. I do not want to be in this position anymore. This has not been the most, you know, fun situation because, you know, I think if, you know, honestly, guys, I think if we had if we knew that there was if there was the Trevor Lawrence kind of or Andrew Luck kind of guarantee, you know what I'm saying? Like, I probably would have enjoyed this going down the stretch a lot more. Like, if there was that guarantee that we were drafting this person. and there would have been a lot more stories. But, man, I'm telling you, some of the back and forth has been toxic, like extremely toxic. And it's like, man, I'm just ready for us to have this pick. And I think it's probably going to still be the same way. It's going to be the same way after the pick because many of the people that didn't get the guy that they wanted are probably going to be, upset about it. And that's fine. That's fine. But, yeah, JSU, I agree. It's tiring. But, yeah. Tiring, but I'm ready for it to be over. I did want to mention one quick thing, man. Prayers up to Brian Burns. He had the surgery. Hopefully that goes well, for him, and he heals up, pretty quickly. We certainly, we definitely gonna need him, going into the season. Don't know if y'all got to catch the Lake Show last night, giving it to the Grizz. Brown is the GOAT. Don't at me. But anyway. Sideshow, man, came in too late. I'm getting ready to leave, dog. Miss seeing you, man. We'll catch you next time. Twan, I appreciate you sticking with me, dog. Got to have you on the show soon. As soon as this draft mess is over, man, we linking up. But anyway, man, I appreciate y'all so much as usual. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe button, and bell notification so you never miss a video. Make sure to comment under this video if you got any additional comments after the chat. I appreciate all the super chats, cash apps, everything else that was sent over. And as normal, man, keep God first. Make sure you, man, just try to avoid the Twitter nonsense, man. It can be a lot. But, man, we got 1.5 days left, guys. Let's just get through this and draft party, 7 p.m., starting 7 p.m. I'll have my road dog, Sakib, with me. Probably drop the link for a few of you guys to jump in with me and chat. And, yeah, man, y'all know what to do. Keep pounding.